Welcome to the Dharma Journey, Brad. Hey, second time round. So grateful to have you on. Oh,
Oops.
welcome to the Dharma Journey, Brad. Hey, so good to have you on again for the second time round.
Thanks, Priya. Happy to be back.
Yeah, Brad's, awesome teacher. I've been teaching Ayurveda, Tantra, Yoga, all of these incredible sister sciences that, this is inspired the Dharma Journey, the title, because it's really a journey into uncovering, I guess, and also remembering who we are so we can let go of who we are not. And the topic today is all about Ayurvedic psychology, which I know you're really excited to share about this, and so am I, because you have a training coming up, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to really dive deeper into, what is Ayurvedic psychology, or what is the mind, what is the nature of the mind, and how can we understand it and really use these practices in our life to, yeah, to we were speaking about before, to really let go of the aspects of ourselves that are not serving our evolution. So yeah, maybe you could share a little bit about just a little intro about how kind of these teachings have impacted your life, and yeah, I'd love to know about the journey. You've a little bit of, I know you've shared it in the last episode, so we won't go too much into detail, but maybe how they've impacted your life, and why you love to teach them.
Yes. Yeah, I am very passionate about the psychology, the psychology factor of all these teachings and any healing. It's such a lot of the time it's such an overlooked element of healing. And to me, and from the perspective of the yogic and Ayurvedic schools, it is the main sort of aspect of healing. So boy, what inspired me to get into it? Well, just my own journey, and as we went through the last podcast, it was a journey of really having a deep interest of the mind when I was really young, and being challenged by it, and spending a lot of time on my own with it, and so it started then. But then, when it came into later on in life, when I had a lot of accumulated stories and a lot of accumulated experiences that started coming back around and biting me in the butt, per se, like when you get to a certain age and all of these constructs of thought patterns and belief systems and ways of thinking and ways of dealing with or coping with things, maybe more accurately, start having a negative impact on your life and start driving our behaviors and our thought patterns and what we say and what we do and how we think. So I was starting to really see a decline in my well-being, from basically these thought constructs. So, when I dived to the bottom of my barrel in that world of explicit drugs and all sorts of crazy life experiences, and came to a point where I was really flawed. I was really at the end of my ropes because I had a really strong mind and I couldn't overcome these challenges and these patterns and these addictive behaviors and things like that. So I really surrendered to, I don't know, I don't know how to get out from here. So I sought help, and initially I did a lot of therapy and a lot of Western therapy based off spiritual practices. And this was in rehabilitation. I did an extensive rehabilitation program 23 or 4 years ago. And it started teaching me about the mind and emotions and the way we think, and how there's, for each thought, well, there's two different thoughts on whether thoughts create emotions or emotions create thoughts. It actually goes both ways. But just starting to understand these basic principles really got me interested, because it helped me understand how I got to where I got to, and also how I was going to get out of that place. So really, the spark was there right at that point where I'm like, wow, if I just understand this, I can start working with the mind. If I understand how it operates and what types of thinking and what elements of myself lead me down this path into the deep, dark pits, then I can also understand which ones are going to help me come out of that pit and walk up the ladder into the light, into the light show of life, So that's what sparked me. I had great psychologists back then, some that were ex-addicts and some that weren't, some that were spiritual teachers and yogis and some that weren't. So I got to experience a little bit of both perspectives, but the principles stayed the same. And that's what really led me to studying yoga more in depth, you know, because that was sort of this Western psychology of understanding the personality. And it was, you know, a great level to start with, understanding personality and emotions and things like that. It was a great starting place. But what I also realized then from seeing other people get stuck in this level of understanding, a very intellectual level, it made me want to delve deeper into other systems that took it further, you know, and that's what yoga, the traditional classical yoga has to offer, and Tantra as well. So that's where the spark began. So I went for it, you know, I wanted to heal, I wanted to get well, and I wanted to thrive in the world. So that was the motivator. I'd done enough suffering. I'd had enough suffering. So that's what motivated. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, normally suffering is a big motivator, but I do know for a lot of people, like even for example, my dad, you know, he's been in that cycle of addiction and depression, and you know, it's just a vicious cycle for many. And you know, if we don't get the help, it's really it can continue and continue until you know the worst case scenario. Do you believe like obviously these teachings were thousands, 5,000 years ago, and obviously modern culture now is very fast paced, and we have, you know, incredible resources. Yet, do you feel like the mind back then was a totally different instrument than it is now, or do you feel like the yogis kind of knew that the mind was going to go this way due to evolution?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it comes up a bit, you know, a lot of people want to argue, well, these were 5,000 years ago, nothing like life now. It's a good way to not want to study them. It's a good way to just dismiss them and go, they were 5,000 years ago. They didn't even have iPhones then. So I think unless they really get in and start studying the teachings, a lot of people have a judgment like it's not relevant to now, you know. And I had someone made a comment recently. I'm like, well, I'd had to apologize for them. I'm sorry you can't see the relevance in some of the most in-depth teachings on the mind that we have. Now, as far as I understand it, the instrument hasn't changed really that much at all. What's changed is our environment, and because we created it because of this instrument.
Yeah.
All the faculties of the instrument were there 5,000, 2,000, you know, Patanjali Sutra is based off around 2,000 years ago. So the faculties are the same as they are now. That's why no one's outwritten that book yet. The book still holds true. Now, some of the approaches to it we've had to adapt to now, because for one reason, most of us don't have the amount of time it takes to really go in and dedicate everything to practicing hours a day and being in a place that's quiet with no interruptions. There's not many of those left. They're around, but you've got to work harder to get them, you know. So absolutely, the faculties, I believe, are very much the same. Things have evolved, you know, but they always had as well. They had evolved from years before that. But the principles of nature have stayed the same. Universally, the principles of the 5 elements and the gunas and the qualities of hot and cold and day and night and the polarities, the basic principles that Samkhya philosophy teaches, still very much applies to this universe, even though it's evolving a little bit, you know. So I think they're extremely relevant now. We do have to adapt them. And that's, I think, the role of teachers in our new age, if they're really paying attention, is to not change the teachings like have been done in a lot of people have tried to change the teachings and they come unstuck because they're bringing their own nuances into them. Whereas I believe and what I believe these teachings were designed for is to keep the principles the same and adapt them to how life is now. Because life even in different continents is different. Life on the equator is different to life on the North Pole. Life at nighttime is different to life at daytime. So they had all these things to go off already, you know, the compass of the mind. So now it's just adapting these principles to how they apply now. So I personally believe, from my own personal experience, they're extreme. I think they're, because of the more challenges and the more fast-paced life and the more distractions we have, I believe they're even more relevant today. You know, that's how I see them anyway. Not everyone would see the same thing, and that's totally okay. You know, they want to try a new methodology, and there's a lot of new fads that come and go. You know, this has not come and gone. There is a reason this is one of the most prevalent traditions still on the planet and becoming more prevalent again. So there's good reason for it.
And are you still teaching, like, are you still working with clients, or is it just doing trainings now? Have you, because you did that for a while. Like, I mean, I had my first ever Ayurvedic session with you. I remember when you were in Bali, but is that where you
I
learned
do.
like the actual, obviously you learned the teachings from, you know, textbook, but then actually applying the teachings you learned from.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's such a powerful point because I learn a lot. I studied the books a lot. I'm not a big reader per se, but I would study a lot, and I've got a pretty good library, and I have read some pretty pertinent books. But I more really go into depth into the concepts rather than just reading more and more information. Yes, I still work one-on-one a little bit with people. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of clients over the years, and it's been one of the biggest teachers. It's made me more passionate about teaching groups, because after working with so many clients, you get to learn so many of the different elements that you don't learn from a book.
Yeah.
You get the real life experience combined with the book knowledge. Now we've got something really, really practical and applicable. Because if we're just passing on information, it doesn't have the same Shakti in it.
Yeah.
If we're embodying it and practicing it, and we've worked one-on-one with people and we've used these teachings to heal and adapted them to work with different individuals, because you really have to adapt. I mean, I'll have 2 clients in a day, and one's maybe an 18-year-old woman that's pregnant, and one's a 60-year-old man, whatever, I mean, extreme differences.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for working with individuals. I still do it a little bit. I mostly just work with students now, because if they've studied the teachings in the trainings, I can talk the language. I don't have to sort of convince them and tell them what yoga, I'm not at that stage anymore where I'm trying to go out and convince people to come to Ayurveda or come to yoga.
Yeah.
If you're not, this is not my role. I'm not to convince you. If you're into it, here we go. Well, I'm ready to start from there. But
yeah.
So yeah, I still work individually. It's rare. I don't do heaps, but I have moments where I'll burst out some privates, which I'm currently doing a week. I might, get a few in, and then there's just so much. I need so much time in the day.
And yeah, I'd love to start like understanding for people out there that maybe have not heard. I know a lot of the listeners are into this kind of topic, but Ayurvedic psychology, where does this stem from? And kind of, can you give maybe a bit of context behind, the gunas and the way that the doshas affect our psychology, and kind of the more an understanding of how people can start to relate it to their own experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when I say Ayurvedic anything, it's really, and the way I see Ayurveda, there's 2 ways in which I see it, in which I teach this in my trainings. We can look at it as a medical system that's Ayurveda, and it's medical sort of, there's different herb therapies, and there's an 8-limb Ayurveda. And we can see it as this very pretty distinct set of teachings and practices and things that they do and treatments in Ayurvedic medicine. And the other way in which I teach it more so now is it's a set of principles that's applicable to the entire universe. So when I say Ayurvedic psychology, I'm looking at yoga. That's what Ayurvedic psychology is, basically, is yoga.
Yeah.
The teachings of yoga. And then what we can then do is apply these basic principles, as you've mentioned, the gunas and the doshas, which are sort of ways of explaining the qualities of our dualistic world. And the very basic teaching of it is we're in a world of duality where we have, say, a masculine aspect and a feminine aspect, and then mixed together we've got these combined aspects, or a combined version of 2 of them. So we have just masculine, just feminine, or some mixture of the 2. So in dualistic teachings, we always have 3 things. We have completely that one, or some combo of them all. And the some combo could be anywhere in between. So there's many variations, but basically there's 3 things. There's fully one, fully the other, or some combination of the 2. Now that's the basic qualities of the gunas. If we're talking the gunas, one explanation of these 3 gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva, is that they are the qualities of our mental body.
Mm.
It's not the translation of the word. The translation of the word means that which binds from the sutra. It's like that which binds us to life. Because it's when we manifested from soul to physical body, there's all these different manifestation stages. And one of them is the three gunas, where we start getting these qualities of the universal energies that start filtering down through the body. So they start at the mind, they're the qualities of the mind, and they'll start coming down and forming or filtering through our physical body. That's when the three doshas start coming into play, which are more our biological humans. They're more the qualities that have manifest in our bodies and give us our individual constant, what am I made up of? Am I more fiery, my personality, my body type, or am I more earthy, or am I more watery, or am I more dry and cold and thin, or am I more heavy?
Fiery bad boy.
Yeah, well, that's what I am for sure. So understanding that is really such a key part of understanding ourselves and understanding how to heal and how to start transforming old behaviors into different ones that are more conducive and more helpful to keeping us balanced and in a more what we would call, as far as gunas go, a sattvic place. So sattva is balance. It's your natural state. We're talking gunas as far as the polarities go. There's tamas, which is this heavy, dense energy. It's not all negative, although it does have a negative symbol over it. Tamas is this gravitational, heavy, dark, solid, stable force. And the opposite of that is called rajas, which is this very active, fiery, dynamic, windy, more windy than fiery. It's actually got more air in it than fire, but it's a combination of the two. So they're the two opposing forces. One that's really dark, heavy and dense. The other one is really light and dynamic, right? So they're the two polar opposites of the gunas and states of mind. And then we have this mid one, which is called sattva. And it's more of the natural state of an individual or a being or a river or the ocean. It has its natural state. It's like the ocean when it's perfectly calm. And the tides, it's got natural tides that go up and down, but it's perfectly calm and clear. But when you get some rajasic weather, the wind on it makes it turbulent. Now you've got white caps and waves and murky water and things like that. Or if you get a cold, damp, heavy storm in the weather, it's going to create another dynamic of what's happening. So it's the same in us humans. We have these three gunas, and we are born with a tendency towards one, because that's in our astrological chart. And that also will determine what your body type is. There is a match between your guna and your body type. They're not always perfectly matched in the real world, but as we'll concede, there is a match between your gunic quality and your doshic type. And the idea is to get them in their perfect equilibrium, their perfect balance for each individual. So the gunas are an incredible teaching. They are sort of one of the base teachings of Ayurvedic and yogic psychology, philosophy, if you wanted to look at it that way. Understanding the polarities and the qualities of energy that move through the mind, and then they manifest into the physical world. And they manifest into activities. If we have a rajasic mind, it'll filter through and we'll have a rajasic, busy, active life. And if it's too rajasic, then, we get overactive and we get burnout, or there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of fluctuation. So that's one quality. When it gets too much of that quality, there's too much tamas, which is the heavy one, then we can, or the too much rajas, we'll go back to that. There might be anxiety. That's one of the common things. Anxiety and fear and feeling disconnected and unearthed and unstable. Man, is that a dominant quality right now? Very dominant quality. And then tamas on the other end of the spectrum is this really dark, heavy, maybe depression, stuckness. It can be stubborn. It can manifest as stubbornness, stuckness, not being able to change perspective, being very lazy, unmotivated, all that sort of thing. So understanding that there's these different qualities moving through the mind, and then they manifest through the body and can create disease and all that as well, is really a base sort of view of Ayurveda. We want to cultivate. There's a sort of progression of mental healing that we talk about, and David Frawley talks about this in I believe the Ayurveda of the mind, no, Ayurveda in the mind, something like that.
Yeah, I got it here. Ayurveda and
Yeah,
mind.
but he talks about the 3 stages of mental healing. That's the one. And, you know, we're all at a different stage of this mental healing process, but this is sort of the stages is initially we have to, if we get into this dark hole of ignorance, which is tamas.
Yeah.
First stage is we need to break that up and bring some light in there. We need to break down this stagnant, hard shell that surrounds our light and makes us blind to see the light of the universe. You know, it makes us sort of just stuck in our own sort of stubborn ways. The first stage is to break up tamas, you know, but we need rajas. We need some dynamic, forceful, fiery energy to break up that tamas.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are practices to do that. There are meditations, there's breathing practices, it's exercise. That'll help break up this inert energy and start bringing some light to it and stir up all the settled stuff, you know. But in that process, it can bring up your shit as well. It can bring up your psychological dilemmas and suppressed emotions and all traumas and things like that can come up in that process. Yeah. Second stage, so stage 1, use rajas, use this powerful force to break up this very heavy, dense energy. And then stage 2 is to, when you've broken it up, and then it's to start slowing down this rajasic force. Okay. I always see the spaceship taking off through the Earth's atmosphere here, like to get through the out of gravitational pull, which is tamas, pulling us to the Earth. In this very earthy realm. If we're shooting to go to the moon or the stars, there's a big force needed to get that rocket through the atmosphere and off the Earth, right? That's the big jetpack. So that's rajas, breaking us out of tamas. But when you break through the atmosphere, there's less gravity. So we don't want to be going with that jet force at, you know, however many thousand kilometers an hour. We want to slow down and then start refining our navigational tools to start aiming it towards our target. So if we keep going at that speed, we could just miss the target. So we get us out of the mud pit, get us off the Earth's gravitational pull. Then we need to slow down and start calming the mind so we can see clearly about where we want to go. So stage 2 is calming rajas. Okay? So this is calming the state of rajas in the mind. And we can do that through practices, you know, calming rajas. So we want to relate this to the moon, sun, fire model or all these models in hatha yoga. It's a more calming, stabilizing, grounding practices, slower breathing, meditations that anchor you in and center you and create stillness in the mind, that sort of thing. And then the final stage is cultivating sattva, cultivating this balanced energy. It's not flatlining, and that's what a lot of people sort of misread sattva as. It's just you're just sitting up straight and you don't do anything in life anymore. It's not that, you know, it's bringing you to your natural state. And if your natural state, like me, is pitta dominant or, you know, somewhat rajasic guna, then the natural state is going to have its own natural dynamic expression, but it's in its most balanced form.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when you start presenting your dharmic behaviors, when you start presenting yourself as you were intended to be, not influenced by either one of these other gunas. You're now in your natural state. And for some people, that's more grounded and steady. For other people, it's a little bit more dynamic and active. But it's your individual grounded state, which is sattva. So that's one way, one model of looking at the gunas and how to, you know, how we can use them and use all these other practices and techniques to go through that stages of mental healing.
Yeah, because Ayurveda says obviously it's always like all disease starts in the gut, but also the mind and the gut are connected. So all disease really starts in the mind. Would you say that's the truth? Because I always try and explain this to clients, like all disease starts in the gut, but it's also connected to the mind. So it's literally the both, you know, I think when we have the mental afflictions, although we're out of alignment with our true nature, which, you know, like you said in the gunas, it's going to cause dis-ease in the body. And is that, you know, when you get to like a person with, for example, addiction or depression or severe anxiety, what would state that would be in? Is it be more of a tamas or a jasic, or what kind of state of the mind? Is it already so far gone that it's, you know, quite hard to get back into a sattvic state?
Look, there's always a chance, you know, there's always hope. And whether you'll do it in this lifetime or not, or do it in the next few weeks or the next 5 years, you know, the way we see it is it depends on how hard you want to work. Now, in those states, addiction and what did you say? Addiction, depression, and anxiety, sort of some of the main effects. You know, each one's different. And we could just, again, do the blanket statement, which doesn't work that well in these systems. But we could just say anxiety is more rajasic energy. Yeah. Depression would be more tamasic. Addiction can be a combination of both in a sense. You know, it depends on what you're addicted to. And Patanjali talks about addiction in terms of the gunas. We become addicted to a guna because it's a state of mind. And whether you be addicted to tamas, you'll just find things to play out tamasic guna, tamasic drugs, tamasic behaviors, tamasic movies. You'll seek them out because you're addicted to the quality, that mental or that feeling or that quality. So then the behaviors just come from there. Yeah. Same with rajas, you know, we get addicted to rajas. So again, there's been studies on this. Rajasic people with rajasic imbalance, more inclined to rajasic drugs, maybe amphetamine, speed, and uplifting ones that create more of that rajasic energy. Yeah. So, you know, as far as I understand, and most Eastern thought say the same thing, is all disease begins in the mind and even deeper, like deep in the unconscious memory sac. But it always filters through the mind. And then the gut has a direct link, you know. So on a physical level, we could say it is in the gut because the whole body really is built around this digestive channel. Yeah. Central channel, you know, there's a heart there is the central piece that everything else grows out of. But then there's this digestive channel, which keeps us connected to life force energy, whether it's breath or it's food. And then our body grows from there. So the way that in which mind causes all disease is the quality of the guna moving through the mind will determine what food you're attracted to, what behaviors do you do, what things you intake or look at and bring into your field. Yeah. Then that starts to create issues in the gut. And then that starts to create issues in the rest of the body. So mind first, then it just starts manifesting through the digestive system, and then it diversifies and goes out into the body, and it might go to a weak organ or some other part of the body that's generally a weakness, maybe in your constitution or your chart or something that's been repetitively damaged over the years. So it starts mental, you know, it starts in the mental field. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have a book called Heal Your Body by Louise Hay, and I think some people don't like hearing, you know, that their neck is because they're not like maybe listening to another point of view. But it's really profound how, from a psychological, how literally our thoughts create our reality, and you know how when we have a repetitive thought, it's going to manifest over time in the body, which I feel is such a fascinating thing that I feel like you can study forever because it's so intricate. And, you know, I mean, I would love to speak a little bit about, like, I guess a path of, like, Ayurvedic psychology is what we were speaking about before, like the quest for the true self compared to the, you know, the egoic self. Maybe you could share a little bit about the two and how does they relate to each other and how we can, I guess we say before transcend, but a lot of us in the reality, you know, that's not what we can, you know, sometimes we just need to be in the body and ground, and how, you know, meditation doesn't help necessarily everyone, but it does in so many ways as well. So maybe you could share a bit about that, because it's such a topic I'm really interested in as well.
It really comes down to a point of how comfortable do you want to be in your body, because we all get to where we want it. We all get there in the end. We're all going back to our big ocean of consciousness. We'll all get there at some point. How smooth do you want the ride to be? It's really what I could narrow all of these teachings down to, because we're all getting there. We're all in this great big cycle of being birthed. We'll go through all these experiences in life and we'll end up back in this pool of consciousness, according to these teachings in which I follow. Now, we can do that and just suffer the whole time, right? And just be angry and resentful and unhealthy and just walk around in our vehicle, the vehicle that's carrying the God within us, you know, or our soul's vehicle. We can just keep it as a pile of crap. Like, it's sort of like a car, you know, or you can really fine tune it and take care of it and make it really fit for divinity, make your body fit for divinity, so that you're going to cruise around and all elements of your being are going to have a more expansive light field experience. So it's not like one way is wrong and one way is right. It's more like, if you don't mind suffering, then just keep doing that other thing. But if you don't like it, and and while we're in our bodies, we don't like it, right? We don't really like it, even as much as some part of our mind might be addicted to suffering to some degree, because that's a very real condition.
Yeah.
Beyond that part of it, or that imbalance in the mind or disease in the mind, is everything's thriving for this connection to light. Everything's really thriving for that. So on some level, it's like you say, transcendence is the ultimate goal, and there's a lot of talk about transcendence, but I like to reel it back and just go, transcendence is the ultimate goal. But right now, let's fine-tune the instrument that we're living in, because there's no way around the mind. We can't just go from our mind being a distorted mess to transcendence. It sounds nice, and that's what a lot of spiritual bypassing is about. And that's why a lot of people want to take the shortcuts. They want to do the drug that's going to blow them into the next atmosphere and transcend it. They want to do the sex practices because they've heard that they'll just ascend you beyond all the worldly suffering.
When's that training?
It's a marketing tool. It's just like popping a pill and Shaktipat. There you go. All your sorrow's gone,
Yeah.
If you know anyone that's done that and it's worked, let's get them on here and we'll chat, because it does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
There are experiences where people do have those experiences. They're extremely rare. For the rest of us, we've got to go through the process of mastering being in the body, or at least get better at it. And mastery is a big word too. Get really good at understanding ourselves and our body and our personality. Understand this whole thing that we have. We have a mind with these 4 different faculties. We have a body. We have a pranic energy sheath. We have these 5 layers that make us up, or 3 bodies, the energy body, the mental body, and the physical body. So let's fine tune them. And when we fine tune them, we start to see that our experience of life becomes way more enjoyable, way less friction, way more healthy. There's always karma, but it's in general, way more healthy and forgiving. It's not locked and tense. It's more of we become a natural expression of what we're here to be.
Yeah.
So that's really the goal of, on one level, healing the personality and healing that part of us. We don't want to skip that. It's a very important part. And that's why I'm mixing modern psychology, leading it towards yogic psychology. So I don't think we want to miss that. We don't want to just get stuck there and just get stuck in the body and the personality and the emotions. Once you've understood them, it's time to move on. Once you've understand your story, that's when we want to start letting go and moving into the next phases of healing the mind and linking and getting more of the mind out of the way so that the soul shines through. So it's a progression.
Yeah.
And I really feel my personal journey was to understand the very physical experience and experience of duality and emotions and sensuality and this and my attractions and aversions and all these things Patanjali talks about, and how some of them served me and how a lot of them didn't serve me. Okay. And just start seeing cause and effect. If I do this, part of me really likes it for a minute, and then the next 3 days, it really hates me for it. So I have to start really looking at those, go, okay, so that's really nice right now and great. It brings me joy for a little bit, but the repercussions are really dramatic. So this is this up-down living. So when we start narrowing the parameters down, we start experiencing more of our true self, because there's less distortion of this light of consciousness moving through the mind. So we start seeing in the mind more of these and hearing more of these directions from our higher self that are leading us more into this dharmic journey. Why we're still pinging around in all that, we don't hear it. We're just at the whim of what's the next sensual fulfillment on a short term that we can get to. It's not like I've transcended all of those, but compared to 25 years ago, oh my God, it's a much more stable, fulfilling, joyful life. Then once we get stable in that, then we can start working at this transcendent piece. Okay, so what's beyond here? And that's when the yogic teachings come in and thrive in Tantra. So that's my perspective on it. That's my perspective, because that was my journey and it worked extremely well for me. I didn't get into yoga too soon and want to transcend before I'd actually healed all the wounds that I'd had.
Mm.
There's a process to do that.
Yeah.
And then you can work thoroughly, you know. It's just like the difference between really digging out the roots of the weeds or just snipping off the top bit, and then it will just eventually grow back and manifest.
And do you think that your therapy, like your Western kind of approach, actually was very, yeah, it was very important before you did the yoga approach? Because I mean, a lot of like, I think even myself, like I got into yoga and I was like kind of already dissociating and kind of not really in my body, and that kind of furthered that, you know, experience. And now I've been doing, you know, because I wanted to feel the fire and the kind of the all of the fun things first before grounding, and now I'm really learning, oh my God, I really need to ground, and like and even it's such a humbling experience. But yeah, I haven't actually done much therapy, but I definitely think that it's my next maybe experience to go through and kind of do it from all angles. Did you feel that that was really healing for you doing it from the Western side first, or?
It was, and I think there's an important point there that you've sort of led me to think about is if you really go into Patanjali yoga, he does talk a lot about, it's about stability. It's not, transcendence is way towards the end of the book. And it's not just a book that you're going to get through in a few weeks. I mean, if you really study this, it can be lifetimes. Most of what he's talking about is creating stability and stillness. It's just that modern yoga gets presented in, everyone's trying to create these rocket ships out to outer space. Let's do 4,000 Kapalabhati blasts after a full-blown backbend practice, and you'll just transcend, and your heart lotus will open, and you'll just beyond all the sorrow. I'm sorry, I don't mean, well, I do mean to be a little bit provocative there in a sense of it's nonsense. It's not really how the yoga system was designed. All of them, you look at the Gunas Samhita and these 7 stages mapped out, you know, and this is where the moon, sun, fire model that maybe a lot of the listeners might be familiar with, based off this 7-stage progression. The earlier stages are all about getting your body in order, getting it attuned, eating well, cleansing to some degree, and then steadying yourself. Get steady in your body and steady in your mind. Then we've got a platform to start working with these more heightened practices, right? And at the start of these, at all these systems, is basically Ayurveda. You know, purifying and strengthening the body are two of the main focuses of Ayurveda. They just get skipped by a lot of modern yoga. Everyone goes to, let's do these fire practices. Let's go straight to the, let's go straight to the launch pad. We haven't prepared the vessel.
Yeah.
We just want to launch it in outer space. You know, it's like getting the Datsun 720 and putting a like a 50,000 horsepower rocket on the back of it. And hopefully it's going to not burn up when we go through the atmosphere. Am I getting too off the side now? But
No, I love it.
I mean.
I love your tangent. Let's carry on. It's great. No, I think people can understand it. I think for people that are practicing, it makes sense, because so many of us, like, we do like the things that feel good, you know, like in the moment, like even drinking coffee for me, I love it, but I know it doesn't serve me or my relationship. So it's having that like honest look into yourself, like, oh, it's like you said, it's temporary pleasure, but long-term discomfort.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so to the question of, do I think modern psychology is important? Only to the extent that people aren't practicing the yoga correctly. If they had the right guidance with the yogic and Ayurvedic psychology, you wouldn't need, it's all the Western psychologies in there, and then it takes you 10 times further. It sort of even picks up where it leaves off. But I think it's helpful to understand, but it is all in the Patanjali as well. It's all in there. A lot of the modern psychology and the understanding, they don't disagree on it. The conscious mind, unconscious, subconscious, it's all very similar, but they acknowledge soul a lot more in the yogic tradition. Whereas a lot of modern Western psychology, and I'm not versed or practiced, you know, studied in depth, but a lot of it says that the consciousness comes from the mind, where it's sort of the other way around, you know, or it's not connected to the mind. It's not relevant. It's just the mind. We don't need to worry about soul when we're working with psychology. Whereas yoga is saying, well, the soul is the main goal of why we're doing this psychological. We want to balance out the mind and clear it out with all these distortions, because it's the light of the soul that's shining through it. So, so if we practice yoga correctly, then yeah, we could, if we had the right guidance and we had the right practices, we could go all the way through. But even saying that, I do think modern psychology is very helpful, and, do some psychotherapy. It's very, very helpful. Just don't get stuck there. People, if you're still going back to doing psychotherapy 20 years later, which a lot of people are, it's not working. If you're still talking about mum and dad and the thing that went on back then, 20 years later, it's time to come to one of the trends.
Well, that's interesting you said that, because I think we spoke about it before we get on. It's like people get really addicted to speaking about their problem and their maybe trauma or their disease, and not saying it in the most loving way, because I know we've all gone through our own experiences in life, and it's almost like, are we going to live in the past, or are we going to push through, and I think, yeah, you said it before with a client that you experienced, it's like sometimes maybe you can share about the different approaches for different people that are in that kind of different state of like tamasic, rajasic, sattvic, or going towards sattvic. Like, how can, Ayurvedic psychology help us to understand, like, oh, if someone needs a bit more of a power, or someone needs more compassion, how can we start to, is that through our, as a practitioner, through our own kind of level of consciousness that we can adapt?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the way I use it with clients, and it's just the same way in which we can use it with ourselves, because it's always that way with these teachings. It's like, I've got to understand myself to some degree first before I can help. And it goes both ways. You understand clients, and it starts helping you understand yourself as well, if you're paying attention. But the idea of using the principles of Ayurveda in Ayurvedic psychology in working with people is, or even just in relationship, it's like, it's understanding someone's expression or their constitution, and knowing what's going to be the most helpful approach to that person, because sometimes it's a very narrow, it's a very critical point of crossover for them. If they're just on the edge, you might have just a little bit of a window to help them, or they're gone again. And that's not up to me. I just want to give it my best shot. I'm not attached to whether they heal. I want them to, but sometimes there's a narrow window, and being very aware of how to deal with each individual. Like, if someone's in a very fragile, very fearful, disconnected state, it's not a good time to come in heavy-handed with a piercing boot camp type of approach. Okay, this is just sort of 101 Ayurvedic psychology. Yeah. So I would assess that situation and think, what's going to be the helpful approach here? I need to be very nurturing and compassionate and gentle and soft, and choose my words very consciously to help them just get enough stability. It's like the wounded bird, you don't want to just throw it back into the sky and take it in. I'm just doing this because my daughter found one out in the yard the other day. We need to be very careful with it until it has time to heal, and then we can sort of let it off into the sky. But initially it was like, be very gentle, approach it very, cautiously, and be soft. And so same thing with clients, And on the opposite end of the spectrum is someone comes in and they're just dense and heavy and maybe sort of kaphic and very stoic and very strong sort of type, and they're stuck in this sort of tamasic pit. Then you'll hear me boot camp talking. Piercing language. I don't mean in a negative way, but like rajasic energy. Let's go. And I'm inspired. I'm trying to plant and infuse inspiration and light and fire under their butt, but in a really encouraging, positive way.
Yeah.
But it's not are you okay? It's like, let's do this. And you sort of plant the spark in them. And it's incredible to watch that work. It's really the key to being an effective practitioner. It's not I don't think it's so much how much knowledge you have a lot of the time. It's like, how can I inspire the change?
100%.
And a lot of the time, this is it. This is how can I help them be heard and understood? And then just give them a couple of basic pointers about where to go next. That's a lot of what I do. Or some intricate ones, or it depends on what they're ready for. But assessing, if some pitted person comes flying in and they're all pitted out, and the best thing to do for pitters is to soften them. Let them get their fire. Let them burn off their fire first. If you suppress a pitter's fire, they're just going to get it's going to get bigger, and if we their resistance will get bigger. So we've got to kind of let them have their fire and their big show, and then, and I've shared this story a lot about this sort of a big pitter guy, alcoholic, that came into a consultation with me in Sri Lanka with a cocktail, like a scotch and a cigarette. I probably shared this in one of the other podcasts with you, but he rocked up with a cigarette and a cocktail to this, and a pair of flip-flops, and barely, I don't think he had a shirt on, to a consultation. It was great. I'm like, this is cool. This is where he's at, So the first 30 minutes was just me letting him tell me how amazing and big and like hard ass he was. And I just related, and I was swearing, and I sort of met him there.
Yeah.
Then when he had that, he sort of, cool. He sat back and then listened. And then I sort of got some of the teachings through. And by the end of it, his whole demeanor had softened and changed big time. It was such a standout. That's why I still share it. It's like 7 or 8 years ago. And I still share that one story because, like, wow, this guy bowled in with this big, arrogant sort of, Shemitah. And instead of just saying, you got to stop that, you got to stop drinking and smoking, how dare you come in? It was like, great. We're working from there, My prescription was like, let's just have half a bottle of vodka. Let's see if we can knock it back to half a bottle of vodka a night. So my prescription was half a bottle of vodka and just 20 cigarettes a day. Wow. I'm not giving that to everyone, but for this guy, that's what was needed for progression.
Yeah.
So that's why it's one of my main interests. Is it's so crucial how we communicate and work with the qualities with each individual. Otherwise it's just, we just need to hand them a book and here's all the right things to do, go do them.
And what about our relationships? This is something I'd love to speak a bit on. I know, because I would definitely say my constitution is more Vata Vikriti, like I have a bit like, that kind of thing. My partner's definitely more pitta, more fiery, but I feel like I can stay quite grounded when he gets fiery. I don't know if it's the meditation, but I know people listening, it's like, if you have two pitta people, the psychology obviously is a fire. It's like fire and fire, Have you noticed that in like teaching and how certain constitutions can relate better with other constitutions or complement each other? Or is it just finding naturally a way for resolution over time?
Yeah, there's a whole segment in my second Ayurveda training I do with relationships in regards to this, and because there's always these questions like, what's compatible with what, and then people start either girls or guys, but they're mostly girls in my classes. So it's looking for my most compatible constitutional boyfriend coming up. Should I get a pitta kapha or a pitta kapha pitta? I mean, there's some element of that may work, but it's more really around understanding whatever constitution you each are, understanding the strengths and the downfalls of each, and understanding if there's two pittas, it's like, wow, there's, in times, it can be beautiful. The idea is if you're both balanced, then that's the best state. And that's the best relationship, is if each individual is in their best balanced state, that's the best relationship. There is some sort of things with sexual compatibility and desire and how much sex one wants, because one constitution might want this much and one might want that kind and this kind. And not just with sex, but with activity. And, one's maybe into sports and dynamic stuff all the time, and the other one just likes to sit at home. So as long as we can accept each other's way and not try and shape each other into our ways, which is not easy. I'm not blazing over that. I mean, this is not, I still work on this, sometimes. And it's something I've definitely had to watch in the relationships over the years. And it's been extremely helpful, and it's worked a lot. And it's like really just accepting your partner's nature and owning and hopefully owning each other's. If you need to go out and do your activity stuff, or you need to lie at home, then that's great. It can work. But if it's constantly this imbalance and one's trying to change the other and to suit their desires and needs, is when we start having, we'll start having conflict and resentments build and all that sort of thing. So that's where it becomes really helpful in relationships too, is to just understand doshic and gunic qualities and understand if someone's blowing out, that it's not the person, it's their imbalance that's coming through. It's their behavior not their soul.
Mm.
So we address the behavior, and we can address and understand that, you know, like if I'm hot, here's an instance in my relationship. If I'm hot, I can be up in the morning, I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to eat by 7:30. Wife is not so much. She's cool to just ease into the day and eat by around 10. If I haven't eaten by 8:39, Peter's coming up. I'm trying to wrangle the daughter to go to, if we're going out for breakfast on the weekend. This is just something that happens occasionally. And by the time we're ready to go, I'm just about peeking out, Peter, you know, especially if it's summer and I'm hot. And so I just have to go eat. I have to eat something, you know, before we go to breakfast or something like that. Or I can just get, you know, get my pack of wolves in my stomach starts eating me. So just addressing those things is a really helpful way. Being aware of them, being aware of the differences, being aware of, you know, ourselves and each other is just hugely helpful in relationships. Communicating, you know.
Yeah.
The qualities of communicating, I said, with clients comes back to that as well. And again, it's not always easy. You know, if someone's fired up and you're both fired up or you're both stuck, I mean, it's difficult. You know, it's great to get a third party and do some therapy too occasionally.
Yeah. Well, me and my partner just had our first therapy session last week, so we'll see how that goes. But no, I think it's great to sometimes have him, you know, instead of having your issues, bringing them to the experience instead of always having them, you know, in the day, because then it's going to affect your work and it's going to affect your ability to create and serve, and, you know, because it definitely has a domino effect on that. And would you say, like, there was a question I wanted, would you say like, I personally, in my experience working with clients, people are, a lot of the time, the disease comes from the lack of the purpose, the dharma, the expression of who they are, like you said, the light, like not knowing what their light, what their dharma expression is. And obviously, you know, it grows as we evolve. Would you say you've seen that a lot of time in your practice, where people connect to what, through these practices, through what they're here to do, or what they, you know, what lights them up, and they follow that joy, and naturally you know, the illness or the complaint starts to resolve itself?
Yeah, ideally, that is a great way to look at it. You know, if you can connect someone to their purpose and their dharma, then, and it can go either way, whether you get them balanced first and that gets them to their dharma, or you get them connected to their dharma and then that starts informing their lifestyles more. It can go either way. Yeah, I mean, on the occasions where that happens, it's wonderful to watch. You know, if they get more grounded and centered and stabilize their life, and then their dharma presents to them, and then they connect to that, and it's brilliant. It's beautiful, you know, and it happens quite a bit if people are willing to do it, do the practices and work along with it. Or sometimes it really helps to connect someone to their dharma first, and then they feel already inspired and fulfilled because they've found this purpose. Then it starts informing, like, well, maybe I want to eat better. Maybe I want to get to bed a bit, you know, just these basic principles of living. So either way, it can be really helpful. And it's a really individualized thing as to which approach I would take. It would depend on the person and what their lifestyle, you know, what their experiences have been to now, as to which sort of road I would take with them. But absolutely, I mean, it's such a key to health. It's one of the three main keys to health, you know, is finding out what your purpose is.
Because I feel like a lot of people are, I mean, in the people that are not connected, I think that's maybe, would you say, from an Ayurvedic psychology point of view, why we are distracting ourselves, and we have these addictions, and we have we have these kind of crutches, because there's a lack of like true connection to that calling, that, you know, that desire to become something great.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I just know this again from experiences, is when you are in your dharma, and it doesn't automatically make your life good and money start pouring into your bank and your perfect partner comes up. It doesn't automatically do that, because that's what a lot of people think. But what it does is it starts to give you this full feeling, this internally, for not mean full like a full belly feeling. I mean like a full, like the energy starts moving from the heart outwards rather than us trying to engage it from moving from the outside in. There's a big difference here, and this is sort of one of the key elements really to all of what we're talking about in another sense, is when we start accessing and letting this desire, the heart's desire, or the soul's desire, express itself outwardly, there seems to be more of an infinite amount of energy, and you get informed by your heart instead of the conditioned content of our mind and Instagram and shit that tells you you need to be a successful yoga teacher, traveling the world, international circuit yoga teacher, Ayurvedic specialist, all that stuff that we think is going to make us happy. It may or may not. It's not everyone's dharma, that's for sure. And it's not as glamorous as people think a lot of the time. But nevertheless, if you connect to something, even if it's like, not even, but if someone's just starts connecting to, I'm a mother. And this is a big one. Mothers, I don't want to open about can of worms here, but if I just connect and honor I'm a mother right now, and I always will be, but right now, this is crucial, can really change the whole sort of field in which, because if I'm a mother and my desire is I need to be the most successful business person in the world now, there's this big friction. I see this quite regularly, especially with peer people and dynamic people that, and I'll try and find one for men too, but it's just a different thing. So that's where it can really change and soften the way in which we approach things. Because, if we start being informed that we're feeling this fullness starting to beam out, and that's when we start acting from the place of dharma and making decisions from that place. But as you said before, if we're not connected to that and that's locked off, we're just trying to get things to spark this. It's really just like we're trying to get things to spark this thing up. We don't know it, but we think that the chocolate's going to do it, or the cigarette, or the ecstasy, or the nice cars.
Don't get me wrong. Sex retreat.
What's that?
I said the tantric sex retreat.
The sex retreats in Byron Bay, all of those things, there's nothing wrong with all these things. It's just that if we are trying to make them, it's an endless pit trying to pull them in. There's an endless pit there. I don't know if you've tried it, but I know it's an endless pit because it's gratifying temporarily and superficially, but it's not that long until that's just dissolved into this endless pit again, and you need the next thing or the same thing again. And this is really such a big part of what's happening in the planet now, and it's just marketed that you need this coming into you to make you feel better and to fulfill your thing. So it's a key element to happiness and fulfillment, and that's why there's starting to be a lot of work done around it with what people are doing, hopefully with coaching, and hopefully with this tantric yoga stuff and this four desires sort of work, where we are helping people connect to their soul and their dharma, and then have that be the hub of their life, because it changes it. I've experienced that as well. I've had two paralleling careers. One was something I was really good at, and it got me by, and I learned it from when young. I was a building contractor, carpenter contractor. And for years, it wasn't my dharma. Maybe it was at some point to some degree.
Yeah.
But when I knew this was it, and I just didn't cultivate the skills to make this my, more of my life, I felt I was doing it. So I was fulfilled to some degree, but I was spending so much time in this other realm, which didn't feel dharmic to me at all. Yeah, it was a means. And the more I continued in it, the more I suffered from it.
Yeah.
I tried to relax into, well, maybe this is my dharma. I can spread yogic teachings throughout the building site, but it just wasn't. No matter what I did, it was like, this is not fulfilling me. And in fact, it's creating more suffering than it's worth. And that's when I really had to decide. And it wasn't that long ago that I really jumped fence from it. I've done it periodically over the last 15 years, but it was really, actually probably about 4 years ago, where I just said, I'm selling all my tools. I'm finished. I'm 100% finished in the building industry. This is what fulfills me. This is what I'm good at. This is what I desire to do. And but I had to cultivate new skills that were painful, like business skills and admin skills and stuff. So it wasn't just, my dharma and it's all comes in. I had to go, I got to learn this stuff because that's what's holding me back.
Yeah.
And this is part of the teaching. It was a sacrifice, but now I'm just so fulfilled. I mean, a lot of my time spent in my office here, and it's not that enjoyable, but it is going towards my dharma. So it's really fulfilling.
Mm.
And then I'll get better at that, and I'll have more people helping and stuff soon, where I'll be just doing more of the actual parts of it that I'm fulfilled by. But my health's improved. I mean, my enjoyment of life, it's changed dramatically, So the cool thing is I can say this because I've been through so many struggles, and I can sit here and go, yeah, this is not just babble coming out of these ancient texts. I've experienced this for real, and it's very, very real. It's very real and very powerful teachings. If we follow them and we do it, incredible.
What would you say before we leave it? And because I would love to learn a bit more about the training, what would you say because it's a big part of my teachings, and I love the four desires, I love integrating it into the work and really helping people like go through that process. But what if we have got a negative, vikalpana or something that's pulling us back, and we are living in alignment with Dharma, and we have a beautiful relationship, we have the things, but there's like one thing that we can't seem to overcome, whether it be, in a relationship or a money issue or whatever, just self-worth. What would you say? How do we get to that blind spot? Is it through guidance, through a teacher, or because obviously, we all have our blind spots, and I feel like it's really hard to see your own shit. So what would you say has helped you in the past when you've had this lesson that you haven't been able to digest, and it keeps coming to bite you in the ass?
Yeah. Well, it's a great point to finish on because it's rampant right now. We're seeing it. We're seeing it hugely right now. We all have a vikalpa. We all have some story that's come from somewhere that's, this belief about ourselves that's informing us to some degree. And if you like you say, even if we're not aware of it, there's probably one there somewhere.
Yeah.
So I really, I mean, the guidance of an experienced person that's had the experience of working with their own and at least acknowledging it and working with it, whether they've transcended or not, is really helpful to help be aware of what it is and how it's affecting your life. It's like stage one of anything. You be aware of it. I've got this vikalpa, and mine was around, I'm not good enough. I'm not important. So it stopped me from being able to talk in front of people. So I confronted this years ago when I became a teacher. I'm like, this is the most fearful thing ever, that I'm going to get up and stand in front of groups and talk. I couldn't get up and say my name at an NA meeting without shaking and sweating and having a nervous breakdown. Far cry from now. I'm spending like 40 hours a week just talking in front of groups of people. So one thing was to acknowledge it. The second thing was to cultivate enough of the qualities, which for me was courage and things like that, to overcome it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most fulfilling things I've done, is to overcome those fears of what the vikalpa was creating, which is that, I'm not good enough, I'm not relevant, whatever it is. It's one of these things where I'm not enough, basically. Some form of I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe, whatever. I'm not something, So there's specific work around it, the specific process work you can do around it. And a lot of it's about, the very simple idea is be aware of it. And then you cultivate. It's almost like one of the Patanjali teachings. I think it's like in Sutra 133, where he says, cultivate the opposite virtue. And this is the idea of this. You find out your vikalpa, and then you create sankalpa shakti and a dharma code to diminish, to overpower that negative thought pattern.
Yeah.
You can't do that unless you know what it is. So my overcoming thing of is I'm not important and I'm not good enough was I'm bold and fearless. I'll radiate in the world, something like that diminishes it. But then instead of just saying it, I did the practices that were cultivating that bold and fearless energy. Create stability, build more fire, build your ojas so you can be a stronger lamp. This is when all the practical elements of Ayurveda come in to support this idea of dharma. This is why this system's so good. It's not just I'm bold and fearless and I run out into the world, yet I'm haggard and I'm worn down.
Yeah.
I need to be steady and get better sleep and rest and build my ojas and build more energy and more prana. Then I can start actually really embodying this. I am bold and fearless. So this is where it's a whole integrated system, and this is why it's so brilliant that we have these systems that work together like that. So So that would be my suggestion, and work with someone, work with someone ultimately, maybe do someone that does these 4 desires. I'll still plug the 4 desires because it's incredible work.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And or just work with someone that understands the system, and it's what I do in my own version of it. So yeah, it's huge work. It's really huge, because that's like the last little weed that's in there that's going to just, you might be doing it, but there's one little thing holding you, still creating some things, and it's still, in my world, does a little bit, but it's nowhere near what it did,
Yeah.
It was crippling. It was crippling. I just sabotaged things. I had so many opportunities of being a musician. I was really good. I was really good at most things I was good at, but this Vikalpa would just crush me every time. Sabotage. Let's do some drugs instead, because that'll give you some false sort of identity for a while. And so anyway, so it's good. That's a really good way to finish, I think.
Yeah. Do you sing? Do you do some singing now, or anything? Do you still sing or anything like that?
Yeah, I mostly just play, but yeah, I love singing. I'm not an amazing singer, but I just, again, it's my guitars. I play. I bought a drum kit. I do it just for joy now. It doesn't have to be my dharma, because I thought it was.
Yeah.
But it's just something I enjoy. It's karma for me. It's in the karma grounds. This is my dharma. This is part of my karma.
Yeah.
And that teaching in itself, these 4 desires things, just huge to have that balanced. Each aspect.
Yeah.
The purpose. Enjoy the ride, and cultivate some means. So yeah, great teachings. All these models that can really, really, really help us.
I'd love to close it. I know you have a training coming up, and it looks incredible. Obviously it inspired the conversation, and I know for sure this is just scratching the surface, because it's so in depth, and it's really hard to really conceptualize until you have a bit more of a depth of these teachings. And I really just, instead of learning it, just doing the practices, and they speak for themselves. So maybe you can share about the actual teacher training, and how that kind of is going to be run, and any info.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's replaced the Secret of the Sutras training I used to teach, which was a para master training, and it's called the Psychology of Transformation, the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. It's a 50-hour module, so it's 5 days, and it's a module in my 300-hour training. And it, as I said at the beginning, it integrates modern psychology and the understanding of ourselves from that point of personality, and integration of these sort of aspects of our history and our past and all that sort of thing. And it crosses over into where that finishes off into the Yoga Sutra work and the yogic psychology. So we tap in and understand the mind, and we map out the mind and these 4 faculties that we sort of brought up a little bit earlier. So you start understanding which parts of the mind are doing what, and what each one's role is. And then we start looking at the Yoga Sutra from breaking it down, what it is, because it's a tricky text. It's not one to just pick up on your own and start understanding. It needs some guidance for you to understand it. So what I'll do is break down and pull out some of the gems, teachings from the Yoga Sutra, and some of the secret practices that are not in the text. They're mentioned, but they're not in there. So there's a few secret practices we give you to start cultivating and integrating the teachings, so you can embody them. That's really the goal of what we're doing. So it'll be a combination of practices and understanding and philosophy, so philosophy and principles, and then practices to embody that. So that's what we do. So give you some really practical tools. Vichara, this self-inquiry practice, which is just it's essential. It's an essential tool. It just helps you determine where your desires are coming from, whether they're coming from soul or ego. It's a game changer, So there's just some really key pertinent points in this training that have helped me throughout the years. And I've sort of brought the key ones in that really, really brought it home for me and put them into this 5 days. So that's what that training's about. It's in November. It's not live online, 24th of November. So you can join from anywhere in the world. You have the recordings for 8 weeks after the training as well.
Amazing. And is there anything else that's coming up that you would love to share? I remember the last time someone listened to our podcast, she said, I really like Brad because he's a bit of a bad boy. And she's like, she really relates to wanting to do the yoga, but still having that kind of she does tattoo artists, and she's really cool. And she's like, it's good because it kind of bridges that gap. So I love the way that you make it relatable.
Oh, perfect. That's my hope. I want to make it attainable and accessible for everyone. You don't have to sit up proper and pretend to be anything with how I offer these things. So yeah, I've got my Ayurvedic yoga specialist level 1 training in Sydney at this point in December as well. So that's at Body, Mind, Life in Sydney. I had a workshop in a couple of weekends at Body, Mind, Life as well online, but the two main ones is the Psychology of Transformation in November and my level 1 Ayurvedic yoga specialist in December. It's all on my site, bradhay.com.
Amazing. I'll put all your links to the to the to the in the show notes. But yeah, I'd love to finish in what's bringing you the most joy right now in your life? What lights you up?
Wow, there's so many things, and I can say my family, my daughter, absolutely. Getting back in the ocean, surfing, man, surfing is just like come back around big time since I've moved back to the ocean. So just living here in the northern rivers and family and doing this and getting in the water as much as possible is really lighting me up.
And drumming.
Yeah.
Woo!
Drumming, totally. Yeah, it's been a childhood desire that I've just fulfilled recently. I love it.
I love it. Connecting to the joy. That's why we're here, isn't
Yeah,
it?
for sure. Look, it's been a huge focus in the last 4 years. It was a missing element of need to focus more on that, more on joy along the way. It's amazing what it's done because all the others got better once I did that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. Second time round. Yay!
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brian.
Yeah, I love it. I love listening to the elders that have walked the path before us. No, it's great to tune in and just have different perspectives from awesome teachers. So thank you for sharing yours, and I'm really excited to do the trainings in the future as well.
Awesome. And thank you. Enjoy Bali. See you
We'll
soon.
see you guys next week on the Dharma journey. Bye.